6 months after the man who mentored me for 11 years fired me by email, he called. His brother had just died of pancreatic cancer. And after everything that had happened between us, the lawsuit, the settlement, the things I'd done that I can never take back, he went quiet on the line for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "You were the closest thing I had to a son too. You know that, right?" I couldn't say a word. Because in those 6 months between that email and that phone call, I had tried to destroy his company. I sent a 12-page pitch deck to his biggest client with a hit piece buried inside it, designed to make his firm look like it was collapsing. That one decision cost me $65,000 in a legal settlement, my reputation across Charlotte's business community, and a client I will never get back. The man I tried to bury was now telling me I was like his son. But let me start from the beginning. Quick thing before we dive in: if this hooks you, smash that like button and subscribe. New stories every day. I was sitting in a Nothing Bundt Cakes parking lot when I found out my career was over. It was a Friday, March 14th, 2025. I'd left work early to pick up a cake for my daughter's birthday the next day. Confetti cake. She'd been very specific about wanting confetti. My phone buzzed with a new email. Subject line: organizational restructuring. 4 paragraphs of corporate nothing. Position eliminated. Effective immediately. 8-week severance. My access to company systems had already been revoked. I read it 6 times, sitting in that parking lot with a cake in the passenger seat, trying to find the part where it said this was a mistake. I'm posting this from a throwaway because some of the people involved are still connected to me professionally. But it's been over a year now, and I need to tell this story because it's not the story I thought it was going to be. It doesn't end with me winning. It ends with me learning something I wish I hadn't needed to learn. I need to take you back 11 years to explain why that email felt less like losing a job and more like getting disowned. I was 29 when I took a position at Prestige Creative Group, a boutique marketing firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Small outfit, maybe 14 employees. The owner, Glenn Ashworth, hired me as an account coordinator. Glenn was 53, no children of his own, married to his work, and whether he meant to or not, he became the closest thing to a mentor I've ever had. Glenn taught me everything, not just marketing. He taught me how to read a room, how to listen for what a client wasn't saying out loud, how to build relationships that outlasted any single contract. He'd take me to client dinners and introduce me as the future of this company. When my wife had complications during her pregnancy, Glenn told me to take whatever time I needed and never docked a single day of pay. When I bombed my first major pitch and seriously considered quitting, Glenn sat me down in his office for 2 hours and walked me through every mistake I'd made, patient as a father teaching his kid how to drive. I didn't have a great relationship with my own dad growing up. I think Glenn knew that. I think that's part of why he took me under his wing the way he did. And I think that's why what happened next messed me up as badly as it did. By year 3, I was managing our biggest accounts. By year 5, Glenn promoted me to VP of Client Services. By year 7, the majority of the firm's revenue ran through relationships I had personally built and maintained. I knew every client's kid's name. I sent handwritten cards on birthdays. When Data Mark Solutions almost pulled their contract in 2021, I drove to Raleigh on a Saturday, sat with their CMO for 4 hours and restructured their entire service package. Save the account. When Bloom Hospitality Group wanted to test a competitor, I flew to their corporate retreat in Asheville on my own dime and presented a 12-month strategy that locked them in for another 2 years. Glenn used to joke about it at the holiday party every December. He'd raise his glass and say, "Without this guy, we'd be running a print shop out of my garage." Everyone would laugh. I'd laugh. I believed we were family. 11 years. I genuinely believed that. So back to that parking lot. I called Glenn. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. I called the office and Deborah, our receptionist, answered and immediately started crying. She told me she was so sorry. She told me Glenn's nephew Tyler had been in the office all week. They were already printing new business cards. Tyler Ashworth, Vice President of Client Services. My title. My desk probably. 11 years of my life printed on a new card for someone else. Tyler was 24 years old. He'd graduated from an online marketing program 18 months earlier and had been working at his father's car dealership in Gastonia. And here's where the story turns into something I wasn't ready for. I found out way sooner than I wanted to. 4 days after I was fired, Deborah called me. She'd been crying again. She said she needed to tell me something because it was eating her alive. Glenn's older brother Doug, Tyler's father, had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the previous fall. Stage 4. The prognosis was measured in months, not years. Doug had called Glenn and asked him for one thing: give Tyler a real career. Something with a future. Something he could build a life on. Because Doug was not going to be around to guide his son anymore. I hung up the phone and just sat on the edge of my bed. I don't know how long. Because suddenly this wasn't a clean story about a villain who betrayed me. This was a man whose brother was dying, who made a terrible decision out of love and grief and panic. And I got it. I actually got it. If my brother was dying and asked me for one thing, I honestly don't know what I would do either. But understanding why someone drives a knife into your back does not make the knife hurt any less. Because Glenn never called me. He never sat me down in that office where he'd mentored me for 11 years and said, "I'm in an impossible situation, help me figure this out." He didn't ask me if we could create a position for Tyler. He didn't suggest a transition plan or a co-leadership role or literally anything that didn't involve throwing away 11 years of loyalty in a 4-paragraph email. Without even a phone call. And now I had to figure out what to do with all of this knowing. Because I couldn't be purely angry anymore. The anger was still there, just burning, but it had this sick feeling underneath it. Grief maybe. For Glenn. For Doug. For Tyler, who didn't ask for any of this. And for myself, because knowing the reason didn't undo the damage. It just made it harder to feel righteous about the damage I was already planning to do back. That weekend was bad. My wife found me at 2 in the morning sitting in the garage just staring at the wall. I barely held it together for my daughter's birthday party the next day. She asked me why I looked sad and I told her Daddy was just tired. She gave me a hug and went back to her friends, and I had to go around the corner of the house for a minute. My employment contract had a non-compete clause. 6 months limited to a 25-mile radius. My attorney, a college friend named Priya, reviewed every word. The non-solicitation language was in there, and it was enforceable. I could not directly reach out to prestige clients and ask them to leave. Priya was very clear about this. If I cold called a single client, Glenn would have grounds for an injunction that could shut me down before I started. So I had to wait. And waiting while you know your entire professional network is being handed to someone who doesn't know what they're doing, that'll eat you alive if you let it. The first call came on March 24th, 10 days after I was fired. Marcus Webb, the VP of Operations at DataMark Solutions. He said he'd just gotten off a call with someone named Tyler, who seemed nervous and clearly didn't have a handle on the account history. Marcus said, "I need to know if you're going to do your own thing, because we're not going to sit here for months while our marketing falls apart." I told Marcus the truth. I couldn't solicit him. The call had to come from him. If he wanted to terminate his contract with Prestige on his own, that was his business decision. But I could not be the one to initiate it. Marcus said he understood and hung up. 2 days later, Priya got a cease and desist letter from Glenn's attorney. Glenn claimed I was orchestrating client departures behind the scenes. I wasn't, but the letter made it clear that every move I made was being watched. 2 more clients called over the next few weeks. Redline Fitness and Coastal Venue Partners. Same story. Tyler was out of his depth and they wanted to know their options. I gave them the same careful answer I'd given Marcus. And I started to realize something that hadn't fully registered before. Not all of them were going to leave. Some of these clients liked Glenn. Some of them felt genuinely bad about what was happening to his family. And some of them just didn't want the hassle of switching agencies in the middle of active campaigns. Which, honestly, fair enough. I incorporated my own firm on April 2nd. I didn't have enough clients to justify an office, so I worked from our spare bedroom. My wife was supportive, but I could see the worry she was trying to hide. We had savings, but not infinite savings. We had a mortgage and a kid, and the severance was going to run out. By the end of month 2, I had signed 4 clients. Marcus at DataMark, Redline, Coastal Venue Partners, and 1 small account that found me through LinkedIn. 4. Not the avalanche of loyalty I'd imagined when I was sitting in that garage at 2 in the morning telling myself I'd show Glenn what a mistake he'd made. 4 clients and a spare bedroom and a growing knot in my stomach that this might not work. Month 3 was worse. Stonebridge Development, an account I had personally saved twice, re-signed with Prestige for another year. Their COO told me he liked me, but he wasn't going to blow up a vendor relationship over internal politics. 2 other clients I'd expected to hear from never called at all. Just silence. Turns out that when you imagine all your clients following you out the door, you're overestimating how much any business relationship is about you personally, and underestimating how much it's about convenience and inertia and not wanting to get involved in somebody else's mess. And through all of this, the one client I could not stop thinking about was Bloom Hospitality Group. They were my biggest account at Prestige, the one I'd flown to Asheville for on my own dime. Their CEO, Richard Cantor, and Glenn had been college roommates at Wake Forest. Over 30 years of friendship, personal vacations together. When I carefully, indirectly let Richard know I was available, he was polite but completely direct. He said, "Glenn is one of my oldest friends and I am not going to abandon him when his brother is dying and his company is falling apart." That word, abandon, it hit me in a way I wasn't expecting, because that's exactly what I felt Glenn had done to me. And hearing Richard use it about Glenn made me realize that everybody in this story thought they were the loyal one, and everybody thought somebody else was doing the betraying. But instead of sitting with that, I did something stupid. Something I still can't fully explain to myself even now. I put together an unsolicited pitch deck for Bloom Hospitality. 12 pages, beautifully designed. And buried inside it was a competitive analysis section that was okay. I'm just going to say it, a hit piece on Prestige. I listed their recent staff departures. I included a timeline showing their account losses. I implied in very professional language that they no longer had the infrastructure to serve a client of Bloom's size. And I sent it directly to Richard Cantor without anyone asking me to. I remember hitting send and feeling this rush of I don't know satisfaction, like I was finally doing something instead of just waiting around. That feeling lasted about 14 hours. Richard called me the next morning and he was furious. He said, "I expected a hell of a lot more from you. This is beneath everything I thought you were. Glenn's brother is dying and you are sending me a document designed to bury the man while he's grieving." He said, "I'm forwarding this entire deck to Glenn, and I want you to understand that you have lost any chance of ever working with my company. Ever." He hung up. And I sat in my spare bedroom staring at my laptop, knowing he was completely right. And knowing it was going to get worse. Within 2 weeks, the damage spread. Richard Cantor sat on 3 different business networking boards in Charlotte. He didn't go around actively trashing me, but when people asked about me, he told them the truth. He told them what I'd sent him. 2 prospects I'd been cultivating, companies I'd never worked with before who had no loyalty to Glenn at all, went cold overnight. One of them sent me an email saying they'd decided to go in a different direction. The other just stopped returning my calls. I had taken my frustration over one account and turned it into a reputation problem that was actively shrinking my pipeline at the exact moment I needed it to grow. Just spectacularly bad judgment. Like setting your own house on fire because you're mad at the neighbor. Then the lawsuit came. In June, Glenn sued me for tortious interference with business relationships and violation of my non-compete. My attorney Priya sat me down and was brutally honest. She said the non-compete claims were arguable either way since the clients had initiated contact, but it would be expensive to fight. And the Bloom pitch deck was a serious problem. A judge could look at it and see a calculated, documented campaign to damage Prestige's remaining business relationships. Textbook tortious interference, and I had gift-wrapped the evidence myself. For 2 months I could not sleep. I'm not being dramatic. I'd lie there at 3 a.m., doing math in my head trying to figure out how long the savings would last if I lost the case. I had 6 employees counting on me at that point. People who had left their jobs because they believed in what I was building. Deborah, who Glenn had laid off in May, and I'd immediately hired. Rachel and Karine, 2 account managers from Prestige who were exceptional at their jobs. And I had put every single one of their livelihoods at risk because I couldn't handle losing one account to a college friendship. Because I needed to win everything instead of being grateful for what I already had. We settled in August. I paid Glenn $65,000. Priya negotiated it down from the $150,000 his attorney initially demanded, and we agreed to a mutual non-disparagement clause. $65,000. That was most of what was left in our savings after 3 months of running a company out of a spare bedroom. My wife sat at the kitchen table that night and just looked at her hands. Didn't say anything for a long time. I almost wished she'd yell at me. That would have been easier to deal with. Meanwhile, Tyler was actually trying. He was in the office by 7 every morning, staying past 9 at night, reading everything he could about the remaining accounts, teaching himself the systems. And I found myself, sort of to my own surprise, hoping he'd figure it out. Not because I wanted Prestige to succeed, not exactly, but because this kid had lost his father and been dropped into a role nobody should have put him in, and he was working harder than anyone had a right to expect. But you cannot replace a decade of built relationships with 18-hour days and good intentions. The clients who had stayed were patient with Tyler at first, but as months went by, a few more reached out to me. Not the flood I'd imagined early on. A trickle, one here, one there. Each one made me feel something I still don't have a good word for. It wasn't triumph. Glenn called me in September. First time we had spoken since before he fired me. I braced myself for anger, for accusations about the settlement. And that brings us to the moment I told you about at the start. He sounded exhausted, just completely used up. He said Doug died 3 weeks ago. I said I was sorry, and I meant it with everything I had. He said I was trying to do right by my brother. That's all I was trying to do. Give his kid a chance. And I said, I know, Glenn. I know, but you could have talked to me. You could have told me what was happening and we could have figured something out together. You could have brought Tyler in under me and I would have trained him the same way you trained me. You didn't have to throw 11 years away without even a phone call. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know. I've known that since the day I hit send on that email. I was ashamed. I couldn't face you because I was ashamed of what I was doing even while I was doing it. And then came the words I already told you about. You were the closest thing I had to a son too. You know that, right? I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He said he wanted to get coffee sometime and talk. Really talk. I said okay. We set a date for the following week. We met at a place in Dilworth. It was terrible. Not angry terrible. Just sad terrible. We sat across from each other and tried to have a normal conversation, and every sentence had 11 years of weight behind it that neither of us knew how to carry. He told me about Doug's last weeks. I told him about the settlement money and how things had been at home afterward. He asked about my daughter. I asked about Tyler. We talked for about 45 minutes, and when we stood up to leave, he put out his hand to shake mine and I shook it, and we both knew that was the end of something, not the beginning of something new. Some things break in ways that can't be fixed. Not because people are bad, because too much happened and none of it can be taken back. I never saw Glenn again after that coffee. Prestige Creative Group closed its doors in January 2026. Not some dramatic collapse. A slow, grinding decline that took almost a year. Tyler held onto more accounts than I expected him to, honestly. He kept Stonebridge for almost the full year. He held Bloom for 9 months before Richard Cantor finally moved the account. But Richard didn't move it to me. He moved it to a larger agency in Raleigh. I never got Bloom back. That pitch deck made sure of that. When Prestige closed, Glenn sold the office furniture and equipment at an estate sale. Deborah sent me photos. I didn't know what to say to her. She said it was sad. She was right. I did not celebrate. Part of me genuinely mourned it. Glenn built something real over 22 years, and for 11 of those years, being part of it was the best professional experience of my life. Both of those things are true, and I've stopped trying to pick one. As for Tyler, I ran into him at a coffee shop in Noda about 2 months ago. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older than 25. He walked up to me and said, I want you to know I never asked for any of that. My dad was sick and my uncle was trying to help and the whole thing got out of control. I'm sorry for how it went down. I shook his hand and told him I was sorry about his father. And I meant it. Tyler is back in Gastonia now, working at the dealership again, but he's enrolled in a business program at Central Piedmont Community College. I think he'll be okay. He was never the villain of this story, even during the months when I needed him to be. Here's where I am now. My firm just passed the 1-year mark. We have 11 clients, not 23. 11. We have 8 full-time employees including Deborah, Rachel, and Corrine, who I gave equity stakes because they believed in me when I was working from a spare bedroom and bleeding money from a lawsuit I'd brought on myself. We're going to clear enough this year to be comfortable. Not rich. Comfortable. I can pay everyone well and keep the lights on and maybe move into a real office by summer if things keep trending the right direction. Marcus Webb, my first client, is on my advisory board and we play golf every other Thursday. He told me recently that he thinks I'm a better person now than I was a year ago. I told him I sure hope so, because a year ago I almost burned everything down over a pitch deck. He laughed. I sort of laughed. It's getting easier to laugh about. Glenn Ashworth listed his house in Myers Park earlier this year. I don't know where he went. I think about that coffee in Dilworth sometimes. How we sat there trying to talk and neither of us really could. Part of me wishes it had gone differently. Part of me knows it couldn't have. I don't hate Glenn. I don't think I even blame him anymore. Not fully. His brother was dying. He panicked. He chose blood over everything else and couldn't face what that cost. I understand it. I just can't unfeel it. Richard Cantor never took my calls again. That's the consequence that sticks with me most, honestly. Not the $65,000 settlement. Not the months of no sleep. The fact that a man I deeply respected looked at something I created and saw someone he didn't recognize. And he was right. That pitch deck wasn't me. That was some version of me that I let take over because I was hurt and wanted to hurt back, and Richard saw exactly what it was. My daughter turned 11 last week. I was there for every second of it. I'm home for dinner every night now. I work harder than I've ever worked in my life, but I work for myself, and nobody can send me an email on a Friday and take that away. But here's the thing I need to say, and I'm saying it because I think people only tell the clean version of these stories. I didn't almost blow it. I did blow it. In several concrete, measurable ways that I am still paying for. I lost Bloom permanently. I paid $65,000 I couldn't afford because I let pettiness override judgment. I damaged my reputation with people who had no reason to doubt me before I gave them one. I am not standing here with some empire bigger than the one I left. I am standing here with a smaller, humbler company built on lessons I wish I'd learned without having to bleed for them. The story people want to hear is know your worth, walk away, build bigger, win. And there's truth in the first part. Your relationships, your skills, your work ethic, those belong to you. Not the person signing your paycheck. But here's the part they leave out. How you use those things when you are hurt and angry will define you more than any revenue number ever will. I failed that test. Not almost. Actually failed it. And the fact that I survived my failure doesn't make it a success story. It makes it a cautionary one that happened to turn out okay. If Glenn had talked to me, none of this had to happen the way it did. If I had let Bloom go, most of the damage to my own life wouldn't have happened. Two people who cared about each other couldn't find a way to just talk, and it cost both of us everything we'd built together and a few things we'd built on our own. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted made a terrible choice, and you had to figure out whether understanding their reasons was the same thing as forgiving them? Because I've been sitting with that question for over a year now, and I still don't know the answer. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.